Yeah, I'm going to present my statically analysis tool. All right, whatever. I'm Dutch, so that's my excuse. My name is Peter. I'm also known as QFox or QFox, depending on which context. It's kind of confusing for some people, so I work at Yugzebu. Actually, this is my first day today at Yugzebu, so it's kind of cool. All right. So I built first I built a JavaScript parser, and a JavaScript parser is actually it's not that easy to do, I guess. At least at first it seemed like really difficult, but it was fun. I really learned a lot. It gave me a foundation for the tool that I built, and it's really a challenge. You know, I like to solve puzzles, and this was a huge one. The big problem here is regular expressions. At least for me, it was when do you know when to parse a division opposed to a regular expression? It wasn't that obvious for me. It turned out later that it was quite easy, but this is the main problem. What do you see here? Is this valid? Not a number? That's correct. It's a regular expression divided by a regular expression. Right. So my first result was a CFG parser. It uses the grammar specified in the specification. It uses that as a source, so I didn't have to bother myself with defining whether I was parsing a regular expression or not. And so I kind of cheated that way for myself. It put out a concrete parse tree, which was really cool, and it gives you a good insight into the language. But it was slow. It's really slow. It did jQuery at 46K in about 24 seconds. That's not usable. I mean, it's cool as a learning tool, but it's useless as a well, let's see. The new resolution kind of screwed things up. But this is like the result that the concrete parse tree did. Is that readable? So it will give you every step that the specification would do if you would build up the tree according to it. But it's useless. You don't need all that information. I mean, it has far more information than you actually need. So the tool, in the end, it's a nice learning tool if you want to know more about the specification, but it's not useful as a foundation to anything at all. So then a colleague at my previous company told me that parsing is a solved problem. It's not actually solved, but for all intentions and purposes, it was solved. You could do it in linear time, which means it must be going much faster than my 24-second for jQuery. So then, at some point I changed, and I started from scratch, and I wrote a handwritten parser, which just means I go literally character by character. I create a tokenizer to build, to find my tokens, my identifiers, my plus, my minus, whatever. That took me 1 week. Of course, that was 1 week after I built the other parser, which took me about a month or two. But the new parser took me about a week. It doesn't use the grammar at all, so it has the problem of doing extra. It's over-accepting. So I have a lot of more edge cases to catch. So the parser became the foundation for, it's a foundation for several tools. And that's the tool I'm going to present right now. I'm going to show you. It does, syntax highlighting is, I guess, pretty basic. Everybody has that nowadays. It does a sort of form of editing. I only did a tip of the iceberg in terms of editing. There's CodeMirror, there's Ace, Cloud9, whatever. They do much more than that. I only did the simple basic stuff that I needed to work with the application. There's variable lookup, JSLint kind of messages, error warnings, and type checking. It's in the browser, and like I said, that's not so easy to do because you don't have the things that should be simple. Stuff like carrots. When does a carrot move? You'll have to pull for that every time. It's really annoying, and I didn't want to bother with that myself. So the layout of the application is the top is the text area, which is invisible. That allows me to get the copy paste for free, undo, whatever. I don't have to bother with that. I know there are also implementations that use text areas that are off-screen, and so they have to do the copy pasting themselves. So at the bottom is then the content layer, which actually has the syntax highlighting. It's actually what you see. And in between is a caret layer, which simulates where the caret would be. Otherwise, you'll go crazy because, I discovered that it's really annoying not to have a caret. You have no orientation whatsoever. And then below that is a marker, which you will become apparent. Went ahead of myself here. Another annoying part, which is not that apparent at first, is orientation of the caret. It's really difficult to find your location in terms of an editor, because you have tabs, and these tabs, they're usually 8 spaces or 4 spaces or whatever. But in the browser, there are always 8 spaces, except it's not really the case, because if you start with a space, the remainder of the tab becomes 7 spaces. And that's, I don't know, I had a hard time dealing with that. On top of that, browsers do wrapping, they do styling, they do whatever. If you do a bold font in Firefox, the entire text scrolls down like half a pixel. There's all kinds of these things you have to take into account. That was really annoying, and it wasn't really part of my application. I just wanted to create an editor. But the problem is you need to sync the text editor on top of what you're seeing, the text that you're actually working on. So that needs to be in perfect sync, and so these little nuances, they become apparent. The code has various levels of insight. It shows you where you're missing semicolons, which is something I'm not seeing in most editors. Some will give you a warning, like on the left-hand side, but they're not explicitly telling you where you're missing semis. When or how you have used variables, have you duplicated them, have you not used them at all? Implicit globals, stuff like that. Typing is it's a naive implementation right now. I have a better idea on how to do it for the next iteration. And highlighting, I'll show you in a few seconds. It also does types and properties, so it will resolve whenever you have a variable and you use a certain property on it, it will show you a list of properties that it has resolved at some point. So it will try to match that. It's not perfect. It obviously has bugs, and it's easy. Well, I can easily take that out. Properties have types too, so it does actually infer the type of a property if it can. It's doing all kind of stuff. Let's see. Yeah, there's a few tools in there, like a minifier, beautifier. It shows you the entire parse tree if you would want to. And there's a problem navigator, which is a small menu. So let me just get to the meat of things. This is basically the tool which is, oh crap. All right. So here you see what's actually happening. That's why I opened Unity. So here you see an undefined variable. You'll get the U on top of it, which goes on the marker layer. Here's a variable that's been double defined. The arrow up is the JSLint message that you should always declare your variables on top. Let's see, here's a prior usage, so you're using it before you're actually defining it, so you get a warning for that. And shadow is no problem, and you'll see that it actually doesn't recognize them as being the same variable. Scope lookup depth, it will tell you if you're using like a high scope, so it gives you a 2, a 3, a 4, etc., up to 9. And at 10 point you have a bigger problem, I think. So there's a tracking object. It will track every variable by a generic, like a global object. And so every time when your caret is over it, it will highlight all the other instances. I guess not that fancy, but here's your demonstration of typing. So whenever you assign like a number or a string, it will know for certain that at that point it is in fact that type. I mean, it must be. There is no other choice. So it can infer that. Of course, I'm using the same variable over, so it will tell you all the types that it has encountered. But at this point in the code, it must be this type. There is no other way. It also does complex, complex expressions. And for plus is a rather complex one because it can either be a string concatenation or a addition, which is a problem by itself. Let's see. There is it does properties in properties. So this property has also is an object because you're trying to use the dot on it. So it's very likely to be an object of some kind, and it has the property of object, which is I guess a silly name, but let's see. For arrays, it's kind of confusing because it can either be an object or an array, and it doesn't handle that very well. It will log the array part, but it will also do the object part because you're using the dot here. It will do constructors in a somewhat limited level. It will, if you're using new or if you're using prototype, it will show you that you're using a constructor. So it will try to do that. But that's actually what I'm working on right now. So it's not that perfect yet. Same thing here. It's a constructor, yay. It does some dead code. It will show you the skull and bones sign if you're doing dead code. It tries to determine whether you're throwing or breaking or returning or continuing anywhere. And if you are, then the remaining code must be dead code. So it's a really simple one. It doesn't do true or false yet. So if you're using the true literal and it doesn't know that the remaining code on the other branch might be false, might never be used. So if this would be 15, it wouldn't detect the fact that this never get reached. It also handles labels, which is actually quite difficult. I never knew that labels were that complex, but you can break through basically anything as long as you use a label. You can just break back to any statement. I didn't know that, so that became quite complex. Here's some JSLint warnings. I basically copied pretty much any of them, any I can find anyways. Some are really hard to decipher because all I had was the warning messages. Here you see some errors. So these are the errors that the parser actually took, and it will show you clearly that those are errors that simply can't be parsed by the parser. An assignment to a call, for instance, is obviously illegal. Oh, I'm sorry. I can. Right. Thank you. So it's basically that's what it is. And then over here you have a navigator. Is that readable? So on the right-hand side, you see how many times a certain error or a certain type of error occurred. On the left side, you can navigate through it, and on top you'll see what kind of error there might have been there. The blue circle is an indicator of where you currently are trying to look at. So I try to make the parser errors as semantic as possible. So no generic, you're missing this or that. Whenever I see an error and I can refine it, I try to. Which it's not always that easy, but sometimes it really just is. And the JSLint errors are just kind of cryptic, but usually it's kind of clear what the problem might be. There's a minifier, which is really a basic one. It does variable reduction, but not beyond that. It doesn't reformat or it doesn't reduce code when it can. So it doesn't use new expressions. Your code remains the same. And it has a beautifier, which apparently doesn't like this code. So, of course, a live demo is always. I know. Something like that. You can toggle certain problems or warnings or whatever, which was I've been working on that, so it's not complete yet, but I do mean to make it as complete as possible. And you can see the parse tree if you would want to, but it's a big, just a big plain parse tree. So that's basically it. You can find the tool on JSConf, and it's actually bookmarked. You can drag it into your browser and then turn basically any text area in a website into a Xeon. And that's it.